What's up, guys? It's Toad back with another edition of the NFL Better Off Dead show for week 13. Getting closer to the end of the season here. It's crazy. Time flies. Uh, let's get into it. Let's talk about this NFL slate, man. It's a kind of a short NFL card this week because there are a bunch of teams on bye this week. So I think there are only 13 games instead of the 16. I think there were 6 teams on bye. I'm being pretty selective. I was kind of hovering around like maybe I'm gonna have 2 plays, maybe I'm gonna have 3. I don't know. I got 2 plays this week, and maybe I'll mention a couple of leans in addition to those, but they're not in the primetime games. So we can talk about the primetime games slightly here a little bit. Tomorrow night, Thursday night, Seahawks are at Cowboys, man. Oh, shit. I got to zoom in on this now. Seahawks are at the Cowboys, and yeah, the Cowboys are up from a 7-point favorite to a 9.5-point favorite at home. 83% of the cash, but 81% of tickets. I don't know if I buy that cash discrepancy really there, but the Cowboys certainly are going to be the public team. And I don't think there's going to be any value to be had on the Cowboys, really. I mean, they're the team, man. They're America's team. They're the Dallas Cowboys, and they've been winning in all these blowouts recently. And we just saw both of these teams on Thursday night, or on Thursday, I should say, on Thanksgiving, nationally televised games. Everybody saw the Cowboys blow out the Washington Commanders in their Thanksgiving game, and everybody saw that night game in primetime where the Seahawks didn't really show up against the 49ers and had a really bad performance. So that's going to affect this number. It's going to skew the line. I think maybe the line should be closer to about 7 here, not this 9.5 that it is right now. I think maybe there's some recency bias coming into play as we've seen the Cowboys have just been wrecking teams. But it was the last 3 games where they had all blowouts. They beat the Giants with Tommy DeVito at quarterback. I mean, nobody's impressed by that. They beat the Panthers, even though it was in a bad spot, and they did have to go on the road for that one. Panthers, whatever. I mean, they have the worst record in football, and they have a rookie quarterback. So, again, not a very impressive win, even though it was not the best spot for the Cowboys, having to turn around and play the Thanksgiving game right after that, which they then did. And in that game, I think that final score is misleading. The Thanksgiving game against the Commanders, I mean, that game was 14-10 with not that much time left in the third quarter. It was a close game. The Commanders are kind of hanging around there. The Cowboys are kind of lackluster, and they had a ridiculous fourth quarter where they scored 25 points and wound up winning the game 45-10 or whatever it was. Just something totally ridiculous. Yeah, that game was closer than the final score would indicate, at least. So the Cowboys looked too good. The Seahawks looked bad on the night game on Thanksgiving. Seahawks were that game was closer than the final would lead you to believe. At least the Seahawks were kind of hanging around in that game. It looked like they still might be able to cover. They were like a touchdown away from covering for a period of time there near the end, and they wound up not only not doing that, but giving up another touchdown by the end of it. So I think that game makes the Seahawks look worse than they are, and the Cowboys look better than they are based on these recent games. And both of these teams, though, kind of have a look-ahead spot, though. The Cowboys have revenge against the Eagles coming up, and that's a big game. That divisional rivalry there, and maybe a playoff preview game there. Cowboys-Eagles, that's a huge game upcoming for the Cowboys. I believe they have the Eagles next, right? I think they do. We can check real quick here, but yeah. Yeah, so that would be a huge look ahead for the Cowboys if that is the case. So, yeah, they do. And the Bills after that, which it's an out-of-conference game, but even so. But the Seahawks, I believe, have a big game of their own next, right? They have this sandwiched in between games against the 49ers, so they have the 49ers again next. But when you're coming off such an ugly loss, and you've lost 2 games in a row now, kind of ugly, and you're playing on primetime, you're playing the Dallas Cowboys, I think you're going to be focused. Cowboys, like I said, look too good on Thanksgiving. Seattle looked worse than they actually are. So I think the only value to be had here is going to be on the Seattle side, taking the points here. That's the way I would lean here. But like I said, Seattle does also have kind of a look ahead to the 49ers, and they have the Eagles right after that too. So some factors there keep me off of it slightly, but I would lean to the Seattle Seahawks in the Thursday night game. Now, let's go to the actual plays, man. Let's get into it before I talk about the other primetime games, which I'm also not on. Play 1 out of 2. These these are gonna get ugly, man. Well, this one's ugly. The other one's not. This is about as ugly as it gets. The New York Jets +3. Let's do it, man. The Jets. Why am I on the Jets? Let's figure it out. The Jets. Well, first I guess let's look at the market here. They're hosting the Atlanta Falcons, who've gone up from a 2-point favorite through the 2.5 here that you see here to a 3. They have 67% of the cash, but 56% of the tickets. I don't know about that cash discrepancy there. And the line is moving up a bit on the Falcons, but I think it's going too far. I don't see why the Falcons deserve to be a road favorite really against anybody in the NFL. I mean, yeah, they're leading their division right now, but it's the worst division in football, and the Falcons are not that impressive a team, man, and they're laying this many points. I think there's value to be had on the Jets here, as I'm saying, and the Falcons are certainly going to be the public team here, as they're the team that has looked better than the Jets. They're the team that has the better offense, even though it's not that good with Ritter at quarterback, but they do have a pretty good rushing attack, even though the Jets kind of do too with Breece Hall and whatever. I don't think he's hurt. I think he's still playing, right? The Falcons have Robinson there, so they have that rushing attack that people like, but the Jets' rushing attack, pretty good as well. But Falcons are the team with the better record, and they're the team that's looked better recently, so they're the team that's going to be getting all the public love there. I would say the public action. The public certainly wants nothing to do with the Jets. I mean, what are the Jets coming off of? They played on Black Friday, so they actually have extra time off because they played on Friday, whereas the Falcons didn't play until the Sunday game, I believe. So the Jets, they played the Dolphins, and they got wrecked. Yeah, so they looked awful on a national TV game, the first Black Friday Amazon Prime game ever. The Jets really did not put in a good performance, but they were kind of hanging around in that game for a bit. Their defense was kind of keeping them in that game, and then it just kind of unraveled. Like there was a point in the game where they had a pick six to cut it to 10-6 and get back into the game, and then I believe they were knocking on the door, and they threw like a 99-yard pick six the other way that just completely swung the game. Like that was a 14-point swing. It looked like the Jets were going to score a touchdown to actually take the lead in the game, and instead it's a touchdown going the other way to Miami, and then Jets just never came back from that really. And even though the Jets were still kind of hanging around, looking like they might still cover that double-digit spread, they wound up not being able to do that, losing the game. Another like late touchdown from Miami there kind of sealed it. So an ugly performance for the Jets yet again. They've lost a bunch of games in a row, 4 games in a row. Nobody's going to want anything to do with the Jets, but 3 of those games are kind of turnover laden, and they were against good teams. So, I mean, they lost to the Dolphins, the Bills, the Chargers, and the Raiders was kind of an inexcusable loss, I would say. But the other ones you can certainly excuse, even though the Chargers have a bad record. They're not really a bad team, so you can kind of excuse those losses. Now they have another home game. They have some extra time off there, not having played since Friday, coming off a really ugly loss. So they have extra time to kind of refocus, prepare for this game here. Home game, Falcons are coming in, and I think they might have a little bit of extra motivation there because Aaron Rodgers is coming back to practice, man. So there's an outside chance that Rodgers might return by one of the last few games of the season here. And the Jets have a winnable game here against the Falcons, maybe even next week, possibly winnable against the Texans. I don't know, but they win maybe even one of those 2 games, they're kind of still hanging around. Maybe they're still not eliminated from the playoffs, and they have Rodgers potentially coming back. So there's some motivational aspect there to look forward to. And that plus they're just coming off playing a bunch of ugly games here. So I think they're going to want to play better. I think there is motivation on the Jets side. And on the Falcons side, I think this is a bad spot for the Falcons, man. Falcons are coming off beating the Saints. That was a big win, even though neither of these teams have a really good record. That was the game that put Atlanta into the driver's seat in the division, at least for now. So Atlanta's now leading the NFC South. Not very impressive when every team in this division sucks, but Atlanta is leading the division now. So that was a big win, a divisional rivalry game against the Saints, their closest competitors for the lead in the division. Now they have to go on the road for a road out of conference game against the New York Jets, really. I don't know how focused you're going to be. I mean, that Saints win was much more important, I would say. You're going out on the road and have to face the Jets. You're going into potentially, I don't know what the temperature is going to be, but it might be a cold game. 45, not that cold. But, yeah, I mean, are you really going to want to go up and play the Jets, play this ugly team like that? And up next, you have the team that's right behind you in the division, even though they haven't been that good either this year, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So, as not great as those teams are, this is still a divisional sandwich spot for the Falcons here. And they're kind of in a letdown spot after taking control back of the division here. And with the Buccaneers on deck, I think it is a look ahead as well. It's a sandwich spot. And this is an out-of-conference road game. I don't think they're going to be paying that much attention to the Jets when they have these more important games surrounding it. Uh, I like the fade of the Atlanta Falcons here. I like the Jets. The Jets are a home underdog again, getting points. And even though it hasn't worked out for them in a lot of these cases, it's still the case that you got the home underdog getting points and you're the team with the better defense. That is the Jets. That's usually a decent situation to play a team, man, when you're getting points and you have the better defense and you're at home. I like it. I like the Jets in this one. They have reasons to want to bounce back here. Atlanta in a letdown spot and a divisional sandwich there. So, yeah, I like it. I like the Jets. And Atlanta, even though they're leading their division, they're not that much better than the Jets here. I don't think Atlanta should be laying 3 to the Jets on the road. I don't think Atlanta should be laying 3 to really anybody, like I said, on the road there. I think it's gone a little bit too far, a little bit too much recency bias there. So we're going to be on the New York Jets. And then game 2, this is one that I had tweeted about because this is one of those ones where you look and the line is just suspicious, man. You dig a little bit deeper and you really start liking this play. It's the 49ers minus 2.5. I jumped on it a little while back there when I was talking about it. I think the 2.5s might be gone or they're kind of going away. You got to try to find the 2.5s, man, because I would not want to really let it get to 3 and have to lay the 3 on the road. But if you can find 2.5s or maybe find like a decent money line price on San Francisco, that's the way I would look. I'm on San Francisco 2.5 here. And this is one that I wasn't sure if I was actually going to wind up being on it, even though I lean this way. Looking at the market movement here, it looks like it's moved from the 49ers as a 1-point dog to a 3-point favorite, or 2.5 or 3. I'm not sure that this one, I'm not sure that this one is really a legitimate opener here. I don't know when that number was, but I do know there is movement. I think there are professionals on the 49ers side here, and they got 77% of the cash, but only 59% of the tickets. So they are kind of a public road favorite, which I don't tend to like that much, but I do like this as a spot for the 49ers here. I think it's a big game for them. I think it's a bigger game for them than it is for the Eagles here, and I think the stock is a little bit too high on the Eagles, and I think the line looks suspicious. Like I said, the number is telling you the 49ers are the better team. People are going to look at this and say, the Eagles are a one-loss team. They have the better record. They're at home. How are they possibly the underdog here? So it's going to be one of those games where, like, the knee-jerk reaction, the recreational guys are going to think there's got to be value on the Eagles here. The team with the better record, team that is winning every game. Basically, they haven't lost since, I don't know, they lost one game way back. I don't even remember what game that was. I think they lost to the Jets, which is kind of ridiculous. They lost like some game a few weeks back where they were in a bad spot. But people are going to look at that and think there's value on the Eagles. It's one of those types of situations where it's kind of like when you it's a phenomenon that you see in like bigger games and in like the Super Bowl and stuff sometimes, where teams are kind of perceived to be like kind of even, and or maybe the team that's the underdog is kind of even perceived to be the slightly better team by the betting public. They come in on that team at the underdog price because they like getting that plus money, think that there's value there. They don't want to have to lay points or lay a favorite price. But in a lot of those situations, laying that price is actually the right way to go, and that team is actually the better team, and I think that is actually the 49ers here. Even though the line's getting up, and it's getting a little bit too high if it gets to the 3, but I think as the odds makers are telling you, the 49ers, I believe, are the slightly better team here, and I think the spot definitely adds some motivation to the 49ers here, even though they did look good. Last we saw them, as I mentioned, they beat the Seahawks, which I thought was kind of a bad spot for them with this Eagles game coming up. But they were able to beat the Seahawks. Yeah, good game for them for sure. They beat them, but now they have extra time off because that was on a Thursday. So they have the extra rest here, which I think is a benefit for San Francisco when it's a game that you're not going to overlook. You're going to be paying attention to the Eagles, and oh boy, are you, because not only is it a big team, and it might be like an NFC preview. These might be the top two teams in the NFC, so it's a huge game for both teams. And I think it's a bigger game for San Francisco for a couple of reasons. One, the obvious that this is playoff revenge, man. And I know that sometimes revenge can be like factored in too much. People can like overvalue it too much, but I think in this case that's not going to be the case because people are liking the Eagles here. I think thinking that they're the better team because they have the better record. They're at home. They're thinking that this line looks suspicious. Like, why would San Francisco be the favorite on the road when just a few weeks back we saw them drop those 3 games? But remember, man, San Francisco had a lot of injuries they were dealing with in those games. They lost McCaffrey in the game against the Browns and Deebo Samuel, and they were without Samuel for all 3 of those games, I believe, that they lost. So that was a factor in those games for sure. But San Francisco, I think this is going to be even bigger than playoff revenge here because, yeah, the Eagles knocked them out of the playoffs, but it was also the NFC Championship game, and I think San Francisco feels like they were the better team there. They were hosting that game. The game was kind of theirs to win, man, and they thought they were going to be headed to the Super Bowl. They thought they should have been the NFC representative, but what happened? Brock Purdy got injured in that game, and they just never really recovered, man. They put in some backup. I can't even remember who it was. I think they only had one other quarterback on the roster. They put him in. He couldn't do anything, and he got injured as well. And they wound up having no choice really, but to put Brock Purdy in with no arms basically, and he couldn't even throw. So they couldn't even call passing plays anymore. They had to call all rushing plays. The Eagles are definitely going to remember that. They think they should have won that game. The injuries definitely played a huge factor in that game. That was the reason they lost that game, man. They just couldn't recover from that. So they're going to really want this game. And in addition to that, the Eagles are like totally in the driver's seat in the NFC now, sitting at, I believe, 10-1 or whatever their record is. And San Francisco they lost those 3 games a few weeks ago, so they're sitting at 8-3. So they need this game more, man. Like there's going to be a battle for playoff seeding and things like that. Like the Philadelphia, like they're completely in the driver's seat in the NFC. So I think I don't want to say they're going to totally take their foot off the gas, but I think San Francisco is going to have more motivation to win this game here in that case because they're not the team that's in the driver's seat and they're 2 games back right now. The game means more to them for all those reasons, for the revenge angle that I just talked about, and because they're behind the Eagles here. So I think that's it's a big big motivational aspects. They're big. Motivational situation there for the 49ers, so that's why I like it. So I'm going with the 49ers, minus 2.5, or like, I don't know, just if you like the 49ers, you got to just get whatever the best number is that you can. And the Eagles, not that they're going to overlook the 49ers, they do have the Dallas Cowboys up next too, and Dallas is their main competitor in their division, so that's another big game, even though the 49ers game is certainly also a big game, so I don't think it's really going to be a look-ahead spot or anything like that, but that's just the situation there. So those are the 2 plays, man. So it's, what did I say again? No, I'm losing my mind here. It's too late for this. New York Jets +3 and San Francisco 49ers minus 2.5. Those are the 2 plays. I like it. I like both of those plays. I guess a couple of other leans here that I'll mention quickly. I lean to the Arizona Cardinals against the Steelers. The Steelers are up from 3 to 5.5, which is getting a little bit out of control, I would say, on the Steelers. I don't think they've done anything to really warrant being that heavy a favorite here. But it looks like the cash discrepancy is on the Cardinals side with 69% of the tickets on the Steelers and 59% of the cash. So the public obviously isn't going to want anything to do with the Cardinals, a 2-win team, 2-10 or whatever, 2-9, 2-10, whatever they are. The Steelers are 7-4, man. Like the public is only going to want to play the Steelers here, thinking the Steelers are the much, much better team. But I think they're only like the slightly better team here, the somewhat better team. Remember, the Cardinals have gotten these guys back, and they're still kind of adjusting to having these players back, but they're certainly a much better team with Kyler Murray and James Conner back on the team, and I think they're both still there. I don't think they've gotten hurt again or whatever. So those guys are both back. But looking at what these teams did last week, too, I think there's only going to be value on the Cardinals here, and I think this line is overreacting to what we saw last week, too, where we saw the Steelers beat the Cincinnati Bengals, which even though the Bengals had Jake Browning a quarterback, and unfortunately I was on the injured player theory situation there, and I lost on that one, which sucked. But um, that's still a big game for the Steelers. Wanting to, they're battling for that division still there. You beat a divisional foe, even though it's without Joe Burrow now. Still a big win for the Steelers, and they look, and it didn't look great in doing it, but it still looks good when you beat the Cincinnati Bengals. So they're coming off a big divisional win over the Bengals. Although keeping in mind, like I said, it was with Jake Browning a quarterback for the Cincinnati Bengals, and he did not play well. And the Cardinals couldn't have looked worse, man. They're coming off a blowout loss to the Rams. Nobody's really going to want anything to do with the Cardinals, thinking, yeah, they're still the Cardinals. Like, they're still just a bad team, like, only a 2-win team. Like, they looked awful last week. But the Rams have really been able to handle the Cardinals recently. Like, Sean McVay just seems like he knows how to scheme against that Cardinals offense with Kyler Murray. I don't know what it is exactly, but the Rams have beaten them like almost every time they've played them. So it's kind of crazy that the Rams have had such an edge, specifically in that matchup against the Cardinals, or whatever it might be. Cardinals are coming off a real ugly loss there, and the Steelers are coming off a pretty big divisional win. And I was potentially going to play this if it was like a sandwich spot for the Steelers, but they have the very ugly New England Patriots up next, so it's not really a sandwich, but it is in between two AFC games that probably both matter more to the Steelers than the Cardinals game does. But value-wise, I think certainly I would only lean to the Cardinals in that one. Dolphins Commanders, I think, is just kind of a situation where, like, again, it's like recency bias has gone a little bit too far, jacking the Dolphins up from a 7-point favorite to a 9.5-point favorite, and they got 88% of the tickets, but 82% of the cash. So it looks like they're a public road favorite, and they're laying a ton of points there. And the stock is just going to be too high on the Dolphins and very low on the Commanders after what we've seen out of them recently. I mean, the Commanders, we saw them lose to the Cowboys, which I just mentioned, but that game was closer than the final score looks. The Commanders were hanging around in that game until late in the third quarter. So the fact that they just fell apart in the fourth quarter makes them look probably worse than they actually are. And they lost the game before that to the Giants in real ugly fashion as a fairly substantial favorite. But that was 6 turnovers in that game by the Commanders, man. Or, I don't even want to call them the Commanders. The Washington football team, the Washington something, whatever. Yeah, they they were -6 in turnovers in that game. That's why they lost to the Giants. They probably should have beaten the Giants. I think they kind of outplayed them statistically, other than the turnover battle situation. So they could not have possibly looked worse, really, in those two games. So I think there's only going to be value on Washington here, whereas with the Miami Dolphins, again, they looked really good in that Black Friday game, the isolated Black Friday game where they took care of the Jets and won kind of in a blowout. But like I said, I think they looked a little bit better than they actually played in that game. They had that 99-yard pick six that really just kind of changed the complexion of the game permanently, which sucked for the Jets and sucked for people that picked them in their pools, even though I didn't have money on it. But I had a really bad pick'em week last week, and there's a lot of stuff going on like that where the public was winding up getting a bit, I think, lucky in some of those games there. So yeah, I would only lean to Washington there, and I don't know if the Dolphins have anything up next, but Washington also has the extra day off because they played on Thursday and Miami played on Friday. Yeah, Miami has the Titans up next. It's not really a look ahead or anything, but yeah, that's the only way I would lean in that one would be to the Commanders getting a huge amount of points at home. I think it's just, perception-wise, I think it's gone a little bit too far. And then moving to these primetime games, let's talk about them quickly. The Chiefs are at the Packers, and they've gone down from a 7-point favorite to a 6-point favorite. So you lost that key 7 there. They got 84% of the tickets, but only 76% of the cash. So it looks like the Chiefs are a public road favorite, and I guess of course they are because they're the Kansas City Chiefs. Everybody knows they're still one of the best teams in football, and they still like Pat Mahomes. They still like that offense, even though it's been not as good as it has been in some of Mahomes' other seasons. The Chiefs actually do have a better defense than they had in some of those other seasons, though. But still, the public is on the Chiefs here, so I would lean to the Packers as kind of a market read and just value-wise. I think they're the team that's going to have the value on their side as the home underdog there. And it's not an easy place to play going into Lambeau there. But I think both teams are actually kind of in negative spots here. This is kind of an interesting situational aspect here, which is what I'll talk about. It just to talk about the situation that both these teams are in. I can't get there with the Packers because I think both teams are in bad spots. So if you see the Chiefs, the Chiefs, in a way, you could argue they're kind of in a positive spot a little bit because, yeah, they beat the Raiders, which is a divisional opponent there, but they played pretty poorly in that game against the Raiders. The Raiders were out to a 14-0 lead in that game, and the Raiders absolutely should have covered that game. Another pick that I lost. Shocking that they wound up not covering that. They were basically covering the game wire to wire. It looked like they might have a chance to win that game outright. And then the Chiefs wound up getting like multiple scores in a row late in that game, and the Raiders completely fell apart, which I think the Raiders did the same thing last year in one of those games against the Chiefs too. So you might say that might cause the Chiefs to be a little bit focused because it was kind of a close call there, and they didn't play that well against the Raiders. Although this is a second straight road game. It's a tough place to play, having to go to Lambeau. And up next, they have the Bills, who have kind of become their like AFC rival, like playoff rival there, even though the Bills have not been winning games recently. I think that's still kind of a big game that Kansas City might have an eye on out there. So I think that makes it a worse spot for Kansas City than it does for the Packers because they do have that. I do think it's a look ahead to the Bills there. And kind of a tough road spot with being a second straight road game, having to go to the Packers. But I think the Packers are also certainly in a letdown spot, even though the Packers do have extra time off because they last played on Thanksgiving. But we saw what they did on Thanksgiving, man. They on the big Thanksgiving, and they went into Detroit and they handled the Lions. And the final score wasn't even indicative of how well the Packers did in that game, really. Like, it was some mistakes by the Lions, too, some turnovers, but Green Bay played a good game. They outplayed the Lions, and that one, now they're coming off that nice upset win in a game everybody saw on Thanksgiving. So I think they're kind of in a letdown spot, except for the fact that when it's the Kansas City Chiefs and you have them coming into your house, you're probably still going to be focused on them a bit, I would say. And like I said, the line's going to overvalue the Chiefs a little bit because the public are certainly going to favor the Chiefs over the Green Bay Packers, who are still below 500. But maybe that's even another motivational aspect a little bit there. Green Bay, they've won 3 of the last 4 after they had a bad stretch there. And shockingly, they still kind of find themselves maybe in like the possible playoff hunt out there in the NFC, as crazy as that sounds. They're turning it on a little bit. So yeah, maybe they have that extra like motivation. They're thinking like maybe we can actually do something this season. So that's kind of the way I look at that. But mostly it's kind of like the number I think is still too high on the Chiefs there, even at below the 7. I still think it is. So I lean to the Packers in the Sunday night game overall, taking into account the fact that it's kind of a bad situation for both teams. And then on the Monday night game, real quick before I get out of here, how much time am I up to here? Oh, wow. We're under a half hour. All right. This will be about a half-hour video. All right. Bengals, Jaguars. I mean, this was a game that looked like it was going to be a pretty good game between two probable or at least possible AFC playoff teams until Joe Burrow went down. Now this game is a lot less enticing to watch, I would say. And it's got this really ugly low total. It's gone down to 38. So, oh, God. With the Jaguars now, with Joe Burrow not being there for the Bengals, have gone up from a 7-point favorite to an 8.5-point favorite. And they got 98% of the cash, but 93% of the tickets, according to this. So they've gone up, and it looks like there has been some movement moving them up, but they're certainly the very public team here, and they're laying a lot of points here. So I don't think there's going to be any value to be had with taking the Jaguars, although this is going to be a tough game to read, but normally, I would say this would be a big game for both teams, like sort of a playoff preview. But with Joe Burrow not there, I think you could possibly argue that the Jaguars game that they played last week was actually a bigger game because it was divisional revenge, at least for getting stomped in their own house earlier this year by the Texans. And maybe they just weren't prepared for what C.J. Stroud was going to throw at them, and they were coming off a tough battle kind of against the Chiefs, so maybe it was kind of a bad spot for Jacksonville. They had a bad game, but last week they went to Houston and they were able to get that in-season road revenge there that is a decent angle to look for in the NFL, where a team in the same division lost the first divisional matchup in their own house. They tend to play pretty well when they go on the road to face that team again that had beaten them in their own house, and that was the case there. Jacksonville played well, came out of there with a win. So I think if anything, they're kind of in like maybe a little bit of a letdown spot there coming out of that game, facing the Cincinnati Bengals, who looked really ugly last week without Joe Burrow. And Jacksonville does have the Browns up next, and maybe that's a potential look at it. And the Ravens after that. Even though the Browns don't have Deshaun Watson anymore, they still have a good defense, and they're still an above 500 team. It's been playing pretty well. So even though this is a Monday night game and you're hosting it, which Jacksonville I don't think gets to do that often, so maybe that will motivate them a little bit. Like, yeah, we have a Monday night game that we get to play in our own house, but I still think there can't really be value on Jacksonville at that high a number. Coming off of a big win on the road against Houston, I think that was a big win. Bigger than this game is going to be with Cincinnati with Joe Burrow out. I think people are just kind of writing them off now. They've lost 3 games in a row. That game against the Steelers, unfortunately for me, was very ugly, even though somehow Cincinnati was still in that game because the Steelers can't score either, but with Browning there. But maybe with a game under his belt, maybe he gets some of that nervousness, some of those jitters out of the way as a rookie. You get that one game under your belt. Maybe you play a little bit better. You get to play a Monday night game, man. Maybe you show up, you play a little bit better. You have some things to adjust coming out of that last game. Cincinnati looked really bad last week, and Jacksonville looked pretty good last week. So I think that's kind of what it comes down to. In that Monday night game, I would only lean to the Bengals. If you're really going to play this game against the spread, I would only lean to taking the points with the Bengals. But that's going to do it, man, for what I have to say about the NFL this week. The 2 actual plays, once again, are on the New York Jets +3 against the Falcons, who I think are an overvalued team in a divisional sandwich against who I think are an undervalued, very ugly playing Jets team. But I think the Jets finally get an opponent they can actually play well against in the Falcons, who are not very good. So I like that. And the huge, big-time playoff revenge spot for the San Francisco 49ers, so I think are actually being a little bit maybe undervalued here. And I think it's a suspect line that just looks way too suspicious. Almost looks like the books are begging you, asking you to play those Eagles as that home underdog there. But I like the 49ers, got them at -2.5. If you can find the 2.5s out there, still do it. Probably wouldn't want to lay the 3 because it's the key number, but I don't know. Maybe you can find money line or find some other ways to play the 49ers, but that's what I like in the NFL. That's going to do it for me, man. I'm Tower Gang Toad on Twitter. You can follow me for my shit posting, my political shit posting, my humor, my sports talk. I'm on the Tower Gang podcast. We are the most offensive comedy podcast on the planet. We just had another banger of an episode tonight. I had a lot of fun. We had Gavin McInnes on, King of the Proud Boys. We had him on the show. We finally got him. It was a fun time, man. Really fun hanging out with that guy. He definitely rolls with us, definitely hangs out with us. He is one of us, I would say. So you can go check that out, or at least once I get the episode up on the platforms, you'll be able to find it. But I think you can still find it on like Rumble. It's up there. It'll be up on Odyssey, Spotify. No longer on YouTube because they're only like using it as a live streaming platform at this point. And this episode got raunchy enough. I think it was maybe our most nukable episode for a couple of certain reasons, showing some things that you're not allowed to show on YouTube. So I think, that's going to have to be basically the Rumble-only episode there. And I don't know if Spotify will even allow it, really, but I guess we'll try, and hopefully we'll get away with it. I don't know. But you can find us there. You can support us on the locals at towergang.locals.com if you want to give us a little bit of money. And follow the guys at flapper.net. We are the unofficial sponsors of each other, I guess, at this point. Flapper, FLAPPR. They are also political shit posters in that arena. They talk about sports as well. They do some sports blogging, and they talk about sexy ladies as well, because why not? We all do that. We're all a bunch of dudes here. We're all a bunch of bros, so that's going to do it, man. I'm Tower Gang Toad. This is the NFL Week 13 video, and hopefully we get back on track here with a couple of tough losses to take last week. Not Cincinnati, even though I did not like that loss either, but the Chargers loss was just one of the more brutal losses that I've had. It's like whenever I play the Chargers at home against the Ravens, man, it seems like something is against me there, and something just unbelievably bad happens and rips that win away from me, a win that I absolutely should have had. So let's get back on track this week, man. Let's do it. Let's get some of these wins here. My college football video is also up, and that one, those plays feel worse to me because they're big underdogs. But hopefully, we start getting there with these we get there with these football plays, man. Football, I had a nice run for a little while there. College football's been not very good. The NFL's been decent for the most part this season. So let's keep it going. Hopefully, we get these plays, man. It's very late, 3 a.m. At least it's not 4 a.m. this time. But I gotta probably sleep and then get up and do whatever I have to do for tomorrow's daily video. I don't even know what I might be on tomorrow at this point. So, peace out, man. Have a good night.